Welcome again, Secretary of Finance and Ms. V from OMB. The chair will now call this Ways and Means Committee session into order. And if I can get any motion for the adoption of today's agenda. There's a motion for the adoption of today's agenda, and it has been seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Motion adopted. We move now down to item 3, public comments. If there's any members of the public who are here with us that wishes to make public comments, seeing that there is none, we move further down on our order of business. There's none on old business. We are now on new business, and on our new business items A and B, of course, we have before us the Secretary of Finance and Ms. V from the Office of Management and Budget. And today's proceeding is to discuss the governor's budget proposal for fiscal year 2026. And before we begin with questions and answers, maybe perhaps Madam Secretary and Ms. B, you guys want to just briefly go through this budget proposal from the administration, and then from there we can open up for questions and answers. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of this committee. Present here today, I have my staff with me, Jasmine Camacho. She's the Senior Financial Analyst from the Office of Management and Budget, and also the Governor's Consultant, Mr. Ed Tenorio, joining us this afternoon. So, as far as the budget is concerned for FY 2026, as you can see, there is an increase in the projections of revenue by 20 million. And then after all the deductions from all of the special earmarks, general earmarks, and the unsuspended earmarks, together with the debt service, there is a net revenue available for appropriation of about $147.5 million, given that there is an allocation of 25% to the public school system with an additional 2% to assist the public school system in maintaining the 180 instructional days throughout the school year in FY 2026. We've also provided NMC with an additional $2 million in fiscal year 2026. As you may know, 1CMC 1331, I believe, it specifically specifies that the higher education or Northern Marianas College at least gets an allocation of $6 million. So we're making that available in 2026. Following that, there's also other allocations made amounting $1.5 million for the license renewals for our Munis and our Microsoft 365 for the total number of users that's out there, using the financial management system. There is $5 million that was made available for the group health and life insurance benefit payments for the retirees. There's $1.2 million that we maintain for the Health Network program. There's $1.8 million that we've partially allocated for the 25% benefit payments to the retirees. There are other items that were not included in the budget, and I can spell that out if I can have my paper. The exclusions in the budget included $4.2 million in the Health Network program out of the $5.6 million that was requested. There's $10.1 million in 25% pension payment to retirees that we did not include. There's $876,000 that was requested for inmate meals that was not included in the budget. There's an additional $3.0 million for the GHLI for the retirees out of the total $6 million that was requested. And then we estimated a total of just 10% of out of the total that was requested for government operations, for supplies, communications, utilities, fuel, and the other items, for the operations of the government. 10% of that, of the 28 million that was requested, we did not even include $2.8 million out of the 28 million. And in addition, 29 million for MAP payment for retirees was not included in this budget under the plan that there was going to be another bond, pension bond through CDA that the governor is in collaboration with, anticipating another pension bond for the retirees. That's what's not included in the budget. There's an additional 367 allocation for the judiciary, which is really for 150,000 of that was for the indigent fees. And then the other adjustments to the judiciary relates to folks that are participating in the group health and life insurance. There's changes in benefits that government workers have opted to participate. We've maintained the 250,000 in utility payments. The municipality of Tinian, there's 150,000 for utilities. In the municipality of Rota, there's also 61,000 in utilities for the Saipan mayor's office. And then I'm here to answer any questions that the members may have. If I have excluded any that I have listed already, maybe the Secretary of Finance can add more to what I just said.
Yes, please, Secretary.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone that's here today. I have with me staff from my office, our Senior Financial Analyst, Ms. Pam Margman, and I have our Acting Director of Customs, Bob Regis. If you have any questions regarding the formulation of the forecast and any of the data that's attached to our letter to the governor. As Ms. Vicky had mentioned, our total forecasted available comes out to 147.5 million, and of that, I'll just go over briefly on our forecast assumptions, which is also attached to the governor's message. The FY24 actual collections was used as our basis. We've included in our forecast anticipated business closures. We've got this information from a Division of Revenue and Tax to give us a listing of those businesses that have filed their notice to the business license office that they're no longer going to be in business. And so we took their contribution to the tax base and basically removed them for FY26. We've also included a projection on the newly implemented construction tax. We've also included an increase in BGR collections related to the military projects on Tinian. And then we've also included in the projection the hotel occupancy tax as forecasted by the Marianas Visitors Authority. which comes out to our gross of 179.7 million. We've also maintained the restoration of earmarks to MVA and DPW, and those that were included in FY25. So again, if you have questions regarding the forecast, we can answer those questions for you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary and Ms. V. So we will now open up with questions and answers. So, and to start up, the chair would like to ask, because you've mentioned that the decrease of excise tax was based on businesses that have provided notice of closure. How many businesses are we talking about have provided notice of closure? And because the variance of the decrease on excise tax is about 15 million, right? That's a lot of money.
It's significant.
It's very significant. So, how many of these businesses that have given the Department of Finance notice that there will be closing?
So just to clarify my earlier statements, the notice of business closure was adjusted to our BGR and income tax category. The excise tax category is a reflection of the actual collections in FY25. So we did make an adjustment for major businesses such as DFS. That was a big excise tax importer. They're a big importer, so we made that adjustment for that one big company, but for the list of 30 business notices, that was adjusted in the income
BGRT.
tax. Yeah.
Okay. So, an income tax, right? Okay. So, I guess my question would be focused for now on excise tax. So, with DFS,
Could we call
yes, please,
Major?
please, and Major, please. So, my question would be, how much of excise tax has DFS been paying over the years, and how was this based, the 15 million of decrease of excise tax, other than DFS? But with DFS, how much of excise tax has DFS been paying over the years?
I'd have to confirm whether we can release tax information for a specific taxpayer.
Well, just a ballpark figure, because I guess what we're trying to figure out with the huge significant decrease, right?
So we're focusing on excise tax. Excise tax was based on the actual collection. So that's our basis. Our first assumption is that we're basing on ourselves on the actual collection in FY25. And that was the challenge in our prior projections, was that we were following the prior year actual collections for excise tax, and that dropped significantly.
Okay.
And so the gap between our actual and our forecasted with the excise tax was really being made up by the BGR. So for this year, we want to bring that adjust that forecast down to where it actually came at the end of the fiscal year, so that we're not constantly trying to make up that gap in
Okay.
excise tax. So really for excise tax is based on the actual information that we got.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the difference then between fiscal year 2024 and 2025? What was the variance in totality on collection of excise tax?
We'll get that information for you shortly.
Oh, okay. Okay, and then while you're getting that information, Madam Secretary, how much of are we expected to project in collection of construction tax on all the islands? Do we have that, Evan? Because I think under your breakdown, the construction tax perhaps might be falling under other taxes. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And do you have the figure of projection
Yes.
for the I mean the three islands? Because I
For-
think this is in totality, right?
This is a Commonwealth tax.
Okay.
So it's wherever it's assessed, it comes into the general fund. So it's not by island.
Okay.
It's just by
Okay.
project that might be subject to the tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. And then now at this time, I open up the floor to any of our members that wishes to ask questions. Let me start up with the vice chair. Recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, SOF and Ms. V, for joining us this afternoon, to your team. But going back to the chairman's question on the construction tax, because if the other taxes that you guys have lined here went up by $8.6 million, how much of that is from the construction tax?
That's 5 million from construction tax.
5 million. And then the excise tax went down by $15 million, right? 15.5?
Yes, that's correct. 15.5.
And you mentioned that there's about 30 businesses closing shop.
Yes.
So how is it that the income tax increased by $2.6 million if 30 businesses are closing shop?
So those businesses specifically, because we have their information, we looked up how much taxes they were paying, removed them from our forecast. So what you see are the businesses that are remaining. So basically what I'm saying is those businesses that are closing down, the impact comes out to 1.15 million. That's in totality of the businesses we know are closing or intend to close. And what remains are the businesses that are open, and that the increase comes from the increased activity that we are forecasting, most likely coming from military activities.
On the income tax?
BGR is part of income tax.
No, but the income tax is separate here. The BGR went up by $15.4 million. Income tax went up by $2.6 million.
Can you specify which category are you referring to?
It's in your letter and the submission from the governor under revenue by sources. It says BGRT and then income tax is right below it. And it went from $33.6 million up to $36.2 million.
Yeah. 1 second. So I believe what you're referring to in the DOF forecast is line 2 and 3, which is wage and salary and personal NMTIT taxes. Those are forecasted based on the actual collections that we received in FY 24.
FY24, FY25.
24.
So, okay, I guess that's what there's 30 businesses closing, but the income tax is increasing by $2.6 million.
I guess those are businesses that have closed already or intend to close. And we believe that because of there's increased activity coming in FY26, that we would at least meet our forecast of our actual collection from FY24.
Yeah, but then if that's the idea that should increase, why would the excise tax decrease by that much if they're anticipating to close?
The businesses that are anticipated to close are not major importers right now that are still included in the forecast. So really those businesses that are impacting the forecast are those related to construction activities for both government construction and federal construction.
Sure, but wouldn't the construction businesses import a lot of stuff for the construction project?
Yeah, again, what we're trying to do is be more accurate and bring the over forecast that we did in the excise category closer to what it's been. So what we're looking at is the construction activity we're seeing already happening is reflected more in the FY24 numbers than the prior years before, where it was 15 million more than it is now. So bringing it down would actually bring us to a closer reflection of the current build-up activity.
And I agree. And then a lot of those GRTs are actually paid in FY24 because a lot of these projects are completing, right? The next big project is Montepocho Road at 11 point some $1 million.
The additional GRT that we're projecting is for specific contractors on Tinian that have published how much they intend to outlay in FY26. So it is a targeted forecast for that activity.
Okay. All right. What about the charges and services? It went up by $4.3 million. What are those charges and services?
So the charges for services on line 32 of the forecast is reflective of the increase in IDC collections, meaning more federal spending. We have increased IDC collections, which again, 35% goes to the Office of Grants Management and the remaining goes to the general fund. So if we're anticipating to spend more federal grants because of the construction projects that we have planned out with the EDA, Public Assistance Office, and all those federal projects that we have, we're anticipating to collect also more IDC.
So the IDC is embedded into the budget.
Yes, it's on line 32.
Sorry, I think we're looking at two different documents. We're using the. Do you know what page? What page are you looking at?
This is the governor's attachments. The
Okay.
governor's proposal, and then the attachment of the forecast projection letter from the Department of Finance, SFL 2025-108. It's the attachment A, the forecast. Yeah. Sorry, it just looks like that. The breakdown, the usual breakdown of the forecast.
Yeah, sorry.
Just
I
so
don't
we're
have
on
that.
the same line.
Okay.
So it's line 32 on the forecast.
Okay, so the indirect costs outside of the 35% is not being considered as a external fund. It's embedded into the budget this year,
Yes.
right? Okay. Okay. Sorry, just a few more questions on the suspension of earmarks. How much is the total projection for that? With the tobacco control, the alcohol container tax, the DB plan fund. How much the total for that?
Earmarks. Total earmarks comes out to 13.8 million.
It's the suspended portion, right? The group health life insurance, BMV
Oh, not the
fund.
suspended. Sorry. This is the restored earmarks.
So the suspended earmarks, the tobacco control tax, the BMV, group health life insurance. How much is that?
Those are not included in the forecast for the general fund because they'll be suspended. It's not coming into the general fund. So as usual, if you look on the attachment, it's zeroed out for those earmarks, meaning no impact to the general fund. But if you'd like to get our estimated collection on that, that's something we can run.
Yeah, no, but this is the one that's earmarked. This is the one that's going to come into the concurrent resolution that's suspending these earmarks, meaning that they're using these monies into the general budget. This is you guys even included the CIQ this time around. MVA alcohol container tax, a foreign worker fund, all of these. There's a list of 13 that's being suspended, that's being utilized into the budget. How much is that, and where was it distributed, so that we can work on that.
So are you using the table that's on page 6 of the governor's letter or on the forecast?
Page
for-
5. Page 5.
Page 5. Oh, okay. So when we are formulating the projection, again, the one that's attached to the Department of Finance letter, we run all the collections that you see here, and then it all gets distributed on at the bottom line on what's available for appropriation. Yeah.
That I think the question is how much is that, so that we would know how much is being suspended to include into to increase our appropriation.
So basically, it'll be at the top of the line because the earmarks are percentages of what we're forecasting at the top on the gross. So if you look at, for example, all the earmarks to excise tax that's not related to the solid waste fund, we basically don't take their portion of what's being projected under excise tax. So, for example, on the forecast from Department of Finance, the subtotal for excise tax is 22 million. And for DPW, they get their share of the 7%. So, okay, you get 7% of this 22 million. But if GHLI is suspended and they're entitled to, what was that? There's 50% of the cigarette tax, we don't entertain that percentage and it remains at a 0. So basically all the taxes that you see at the top being forecasted is not being touched, right? So to answer your question, how much, just look at the total tax that's being forecasted and that amount remains.
Okay, well, let's take the CIQ for example. We're never going to know that number because that goes directly to finance through customs. And that's dependent on the number of passengers that enter the CNMI.
Yeah.
And we're suspending that. So obviously finance has a number for that that's embedded into the budget.
Line 33. So just to revisit your question, you're asking how much is going into the general fund for appropriation.
From the list of 13.
Yeah. So if we go line by line, we would just go to their source, right, in the forecast. So if you're talking about the CIQ, we just go to line 33 in our forecast and it will show you 1.4. There's your source number that remains in the general fund and it's not going to be earmarked to any agency. So it's if you just trace all the earmarks that are listed on page 6 of the governor's or 5 on the governor's letter. So basically those source funds from the forecast will not be affected by these earmarks, right? And that the gross that we're projecting will stay at it as it is and goes into the general fund for appropriation.
You're right. But if you look at the suspensions, they're break down in percent. Some of them are broken down in percentages. You take the e-gaming, for example, 60%. What's 60% that's going to be collected?
Okay, so I think what we can do is because we did not do any of these earmarks because they're not included, we can go back and do a calculation and say if they were restored, this is how much is the impact and how much would be reduced from the general fund. Is that what you're asking for?
Built into the general fund, right? In the budget submission, it's suspended, so therefore it's included in the projection of the budget, right?
So then the category stays whole. It doesn't. It's not touched. But if what you're asking me is if we did restore these earmarks, then how much will excise tax be reduced? How much will tobacco tax be reduced? So then I'm going to have to go to the top and calculate all these percentages that you have here and say, if you want to consider unsuspending them and restoring them, this is the cost to the general fund.
And
But right now, there is no impact because they're suspended.
yeah, and that's the thing, because as you know, over the years, the Senate version has continuously suspend earmarks that have been suspended in the governor's submission. Right, they'll strike it through and consider it part of the general appropriation, or goes back to its original intent. We're going to be passing an unbalanced budget, but if
Yeah.
we have this number, we already know what's the total amount that was distributed from these suspensions into the general appropriations, and we at the very least should be able to get information from finance or OMB where these monies were actually allocated to in the budget submission.
So to answer your question, there's 13 that's listed on the governor's message of earmarks that are suspended. They have no impact on the budget. So we can go back and do that analysis as to what's the impact should the Senate restore them. What's the impact to the general fund? As far as whether we took that separately and then distributed it in the budget separately, that's not how the budget was formulated. I believe we just left it in the pot, and then from the pot, that's what's being distributed, not separately as each individual impact of, let's say, the tobacco control.
Yeah, no, and I do understand that, SOF, but the thing is, we should at the very least be able to get that bottom line number from
Yeah.
you guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, we can
So,
provide that.
okay.
We'll go ahead and take the 13 earmarks and calculate them as if you were going to restore them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just last question on the MVA hot tax. The projection from the last fiscal year was like 4 point some million dollars. Now it's up to $7 million. Where did we get that number? Because everything we've been reading in the paper is 28% occupancy, 30% occupancy.
So in reviewing the forecast for the hotel occupancy tax, our actual collection, again, that's what we use as our basis for the assumption. We collected 6.4 million in FY24. So that's our basis of where do we start. And then we use the forecast from MVA, which came out to 8.8 million, and that forecast, again, they mentioned, was as part of their efforts to increase airlines and hotel stays. So we use that as our basis as well.
So out of the $6 million that was collected for FY24, is it 24 or 25?
24 930 2024.
Okay, what
Yeah.
was all the $6 point some million remitted to MVA?
80% only, 80% earmark.
Yeah, well, it's so the total collection from
Gross.
hotel occupancy tax was $6 point some million.
Yes.
So $4 million was given to MVA
On a monthly basis, yes.
on a monthly basis. So now they're projecting $7 million. So there's an increase of $3 million. That really, that's how
That's based on their
accurate.
expertise in their area. Again, they're anticipating, like you might have seen in the paper, they met with 17 different airlines, really trying to boost the number of airlines coming in, considering the regulatory requirements placed on Jeju Air. And so I'm not the expert here on the tourism efforts, but I do know based on their a budget submission and their forecast that it's best to do that specific line item based on what they believe is going to happen in FY 2026.
Okay, so just on finances side, just the collection side,
Mhm.
how much are they getting from the hotels, the main hotels? Because unless all Airbnbs in the CNMI are registered Airbnbs, then I can almost agree to the number. But if they're not registered Airbnbs, that might be this is huge, $3 million. I mean, I wanna believe that we're gonna get $3 million, but the hotel rates are showing us that we're at like 30%. At the highest I think we've seen was 38% so far.
Without MVA here to give you specifics on their efforts, I do know that in discussions, even in our cabinet meetings, they've shared just the optimism that they had, especially with the meetings that they've had with the 17 airlines, and with a lot of renewed interest in establishing additional charter flights and other airlines that were established here before. And I don't want to be the one to say, because I wasn't in those meetings, but there's a lot of optimism with the renewed efforts going out there, especially with the new presidential administration. So again, I'm relying on MVA's expertise in their area and their efforts. And that's our basis of our forecast.
Okay, so can I ask this, from October 1st to what's the date today? April 7. What's the number of collections from the hotels just on hot tax?
One moment, we could get that for you.
Yes, I guess when we get that information, I'll yield my time. But thank you, and I'm hopeful that that $7 million. We're asking this because if we're receiving $7 million, that means the other 20% is going to be about $11 million total, right?
Yeah. 2.6. Okay, so just to answer your question real quick, we collected 2.6 million in hotel occupancy tax.
As of today,
Yes,
today,
end of March,
$2.2 million,
2.6 million.
$2.6 million. So that we're almost halfway there. Okay, I yield my time. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Didi.
Okay. Any other members have a question? If you guys are still uh, figuring out your question, is there any way, Madam Secretary, that the chair would request the projected generation of construction tax for all three islands? You can submit it on a later date, and also, can you speak more on the administration's plan on the floating of the 29 million POB, pension obligation bond, and how is that going to impact if we are not successful on that floating of a bond?
Thank you, Chair. We'll note for your requests for the breakdown of construction tax by island. We'll get that information to you. As for the pension obligation bond, if I may direct you to, again, the memo from our office to the governor, SFL 2025-108, there is a figure 1 forecast scenarios that was provided in scenario 1 and scenario 2. In scenario 1, we are assuming that we are successful in securing a pension obligation bond or even a bond anticipation note, and that leaves us to the governor's proposal, which comes out to 147.5 million available for budgetary appropriation. However, if we are unsuccessful, that brings us to scenario 2, where the full obligation of the minimum annual payment to the NMI settlement fund, that drops our available budgetary resources to 123.9 million. And so we understand that impact. The governor is doing everything we can with CEDA to work with our bond underwriters and seeing our ability to secure a pension bond for FY26. However, I know the governor is in discussions with CEDA on other options, including MPLT and other sources that we may want to consider to secure in the short term.
Okay, thank you for that response. And the chair would also, on top of the request of getting that breakdown of the construction tax on all three islands, if I also can request that we get a breakdown on starting on October 1st of this fiscal year to present how much excise tax is collected, and that can be submitted also on a later date to this body. And also, if we can also get the breakdown from October 1st to present also on the CIQ overtime revolving fund, as it is based and highly dependent on passengers coming into our islands. Are there any questions from any other of the members? Let me recognize Representative Ralph Yumo.
Thank you, Chairman. And just clarifying questions with regards to the $14 million. So the administration is projecting approximately $280 million in projects this fiscal year, as in project revenue in the budget plan, and that's why it reflects $14 million. So is that an accurate figure where we're expecting additional project in the amount of approximately $280 million, which, if you take 5%, is $14 million?
Could you please specify what part of the letter was that?
It's the first page of your, I guess, the administration's letter to the speaker. It says this budget plan reflects an increase of 14 million in project revenues compared to 25. So does that mean that there is going to be approximately $280 million in project in the CNMI this fiscal year to come up with $14 million?
Actually, the increase of $14 million is over all tax categories, not just one category.
Okay.
So the construction tax, again, the impact of that to the projection is only $5 million.
Okay.
So,
Because I wanted clarification because it's project revenues. It didn't say spread out towards taxes. Maybe it's not worded correctly, but I'm just, the first page, it just says project revenues. And that's why I wanted to clarify, what does that mean?
Our apologies. It should have been past tense projected.
Oh, project. Okay. So it's a typo. Because when I read it, I'm like, wow, there's $14 million additional. That means an increase of 280 million, or close to $300 million into cinema. Okay, so that's clarified. It's projected. Sorry. And then With regards to the BGR, I know it's a big gap. And if you're using the baseline of 2024 figures, and then now you're increasing it by $15 million. Um, I mean, I, I I need more elaboration as far as what is going to be included with when you see everything here in the cinema decreasing. That's a big projection or a big increase between FY24. I'll still look at FY25 as the base because we're just ending it, and I don't see based on at least on my family's businesses, it's not a big increase in percentage. We're only talking maybe a 2 or 3% increase from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. So can you elaborate more on that, and how do we come up with that projection? And then with regards to the DFS, we can assume DFS generates 300 million because you're saying that's the major factor in them closing. They contribute, if it's 5%, just the base figure of not to include luxury items, but you're talking about 300 million in decreased revenue, if that's the figure. So I don't see the increase in BGRT if a big company like that is going to be closing.
I'm sorry, can you specify where you got the 300 million?
No,
for-
I'm just projecting it out of
Oh.
based out of a percentage. If you were to lose $15 million, we're looking at $300 million just disappear from the cinema. If that's the number of a dollar figure, that if excise is coming in and we're not receiving that amount, we're projecting a $300 million in sales if we're not going to receive it. So I just wanted to see where
So
in line
there's a lot of things in your question. So we just want to unpack it slowly, one by one. So the BGR projection that includes an increase of 3.6 million without having to disclose certain taxpayers. We focused on the military activities that are expected and have been published that will be most likely completed in FY 2026. We took these specific contractors, looked at their contributions to the tax base, and forecasted that into FY 26 based on their published anticipated expenditures in FY 26.
So this is majority of the increase would be coming from Tinian. That's what you're saying.
In the BGR specifically,
Yes.
So the first step in the BGR was from the FY25 budget was an increase because of the actual collection. So that's the first step up. And then the next step up is the increase from Tinian military activity. So that's number one that I hear in your question. Number two, you asked about excise tax. To assume that the entire decrease of 15 million came from one importer, DFS, that is incorrect. The reflection of 15.6 million is all taxpayers across the board. And I can't disclose tax information about DFS because they're one specific taxpayer, but the impact is not from DFS.
Yeah, you were talking about 30 companies you did mention, right? And DFS obviously was the main that have expressed that they're not continuing. So I'm assuming they carry the bulk of the closure or the decrease in excise.
Maybe we'll try and figure out how to give you some information on aggregate data on
Okay. But I don't need to get the real numbers of DFS. Don't get me wrong about. Well, I'm just assuming that that's the bulk of the large loss of excise because they import a lot of luxury items. Obviously, they pay different tax, and I know they don't pay everything on upfront because I'm assuming they had bonded warehouses and they don't release or they don't pay taxes on those items unless it leaves.
Hi, everybody. Afternoon. Specifically with them not to kind of get our, but they do have also a concessionary agreement with
Oh, yeah.
CPA, right, under the government. So the trend in the last 3 years was from them fully importing to last fiscal year where it was very minimal. They already knew that I guess they were cutting down, and
Okay.
then to this year where majority of it were just done through basically an offset from the agreement they have with CPA.
Okay. Okay. So clarified.
Overall, it's very minimal.
Yes,
But we'll figure out
I
if
would
you
think.
want to analyze that situation, we'll try and figure out a way to give you the aggregate data.
Yeah, I'm just trying to just get my head wrapped around this increase of $15 million in BGR. I know there is going to be a lot of projects, but when you have a significant amount of businesses that are closing that imports a lot of these items and we can track those because customs obviously is the first line of to receive and get those projections, and then we can project forward as far as what it would generate in the cinema. So I just wanted that clear. I didn't want to do too much on the closures of companies, but if they a few companies control that much, I would prefer seeing a more, I guess, safer number. I know you like to be safe in a lot of your projection, but that 15 billion and maybe $8 million increase would be the right amount. But that's not my job. We're just trying to get a clear. Um, um, Other than that, I have just one more question with regards to on page 2, the federal funds. There's you said federal grant revenues. How does that impact the general fund on page 2? And then do they or how much of that federal grant revenue is embedded in the budget?
So if you look at volume, I believe it's volume 2 for federal grants, there's a summary also that's provided on total active grants to the Commonwealth was a little bit over $1 billion
Okay.
for programs and projects. That includes EDA, capital improvement projects, and then program services to the various departments and agencies, SNAP, the PUA funds, FEMA allocation for the disasters that are still active. That's the makeup of that particular uh, dollar figure.
So the net
$1
effect is
billion.
just only 1 million.
Pardon?
1 million is only the effect. Is that what you said? 1 million?
No. The total.
Oh,
The
1
total.
billion.
The total available active grants to the Commonwealth is $1 billion.
Oh, 1 billion. Okay. So, do we have an estimate of what that generates in the cinema? Do we have that as like a multiplier effect? Does finance have that? No, we don't have that. As far as like job creation or uh, no
I mean,
impact.
we can use what EDA used before, which is $92,000, and that would be the impact on the number of jobs.
And I guess the BJ asked that. The $95 million gap. I mean, how does this affect the agencies now that you were able to have I guess between the funding request and what they're actually gonna get, is that gonna affect services in the CNMI?
It will definitely affect the services that's going to be pushed out by all of these departments and agencies and programs that are administered by by set instrumentalities of the government. We are going to have to figure out which is the priority. Do we